Good evening. It's now 6:30 p.m. and I call this regular meeting of the Victoria City Council to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening is announcements. All meetings of the City Council are open to the public and held in the council chambers at City Hall unless otherwise noted. If you're interested in speaking at a council meeting, we encourage you to contact our city clerk for more information. The next City Council workshop is scheduled for October 18th. This workshop is on a Wednesday and will be held from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at the Victoria Recreation Center. The focus of the workshop will be Victoria's overall park system, including parks, trails, and the Victoria Rec Center. In other announcements, there will be an open house on Wednesday, September 27th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the Minnesota Arboretum for the upcoming Highway 5 and 82nd Street projects. This event is open to the public. To learn more, we invite you to visit the City of Victoria's website. And lastly, this Thursday, September 28th, will be the last farmers market of the season. Please swing over to Enke Brewing to pick up some fresh veggies and other local goodies. The next item, there are no proclamations this evening, so the next item on our agenda is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt the final agenda.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda or not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. No one has registered to speak in advance, and there is no one in the audience this evening, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine, administrative, and do not require deliberation, or are housekeeping items required by law. Consent agenda items are approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent items for separate discussion and vote?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, staff would like to pull 3 items this evening, item 5.2, 5.9, and 5.10.
Got it. Council, are there any items you would like to see pulled for separate discussion? All right, seeing none, clerk, please let the record reflect that items number 5.2, 5.9, and 5.10 have been pulled for further discussion. Council, can I get a motion for the balance of the consent agenda, please?
Motion.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now on to items 5.2, 5.9, and 5.10, which were removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote. Council, it makes sense to consider 5.10 first, so with that, I will open the floor. Let me kick this over to Ms. Hardy to give us an explanation on this. 5.10.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I think it probably makes most sense to combine, for sake of discussion, items 5.2 and 5.10. 5.2 is claims, the claims roster, and 5.10 is a change order and pay request as it relates to Steiger Lake Lane West Phase 1 improvements. And our city engineer is here to discuss in more detail. But before I hand it over to her, I just wanted to note also when she's done kind of provided an overview for why we're pulling this, which is for transparency reasons, it probably will make sense for you to take action on 5.10 before you take action on 5.2 because there are references in the claims roster to the Steiger Lake Lane West improvement. So depending on how the discussion shakes out, you may have to do something different with the claims roster. So on that note, I will pass the baton over to our city engineer.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. When you approved the project for the Steiger Lake Lane project in the approving resolution, you granted the manager the authority to sign pay requests and change orders as long as they were within the budget that we set at the time of the project. The budget we set at the time of approval of the project was, I'm going to make sure I say the right number, $2.38 million. That project budget typically includes a contingency that we have in place for unforeseen circumstances. With the current change order that's in front of you, approval of that brings us over that 2.8 budget that we set back in 2022. So for transparency purposes and because of the resolution written the way it was, the council needs to approve that. Because when the project's said and done, we're anticipating that we will likely be over the budget that the council set. So lots of words, but to the meat and potatoes of it, what's detailed in the change order is some unforeseen circumstances that we encountered in the field, primarily related to the sanitary sewer. The most significant line item in the change order was to replace an existing manhole that was like 30-some feet deep, located about 16 feet from an equally deep Met Council manhole and adjacent to a property line. That manhole was installed a number of years ago when we extended utilities to the western growth area. And when they started to work in and around the manhole, what was discovered was that the interior concrete on the manhole was totally deteriorating, to the point that the Public Works team at that point even evaluated putting a lining. That's what often we'll do to repair a manhole, but they couldn't even recommend that we line the manhole based on the condition. So we think the reason for that is the force main from the western growth area discharges into that manhole, and we think the sewer gases were causing the deterioration of the concrete. At that point, the sewer was on temporary bypass, the road was open, we're building brand new road over the top of it, parking, streetscape features, retaining wall. We needed to go ahead and get that replaced, and given the site constraints, the contractor had to bring in specialized equipment, and it took a whole lot of days to replace that manhole. So that's the bulk of what that extra is for. So we've reviewed it with the finance director. The funding for the overrun, if at the end of the job we are in fact that far over, will come from the Sanitary Sewer Enterprise Fund, which is how we pay for repairs to the sanitary sewer system. We did conclude that we want to make sure that we don't see this circumstance replicate itself. So the force main connection is moving with the new extension of the utilities, and Public Works has gotten quotes to line the new manhole that this will tie into after our project is complete. That'll be a separate Public Works activity. And then we have two other circumstances in the city that have somewhat of a similar discharge, so we're taking a look at those to see if we should be proactively doing any lining to those other two manholes in the system. And with that, I'll take any questions specific to that.
All right, thank you, Ms. Guerin, and thank you to the neighbors. We know this has been disruptive to them. Thank you for your patience while we work our way through these things. Infrastructure is important. We want to get it right. So
yeah, if it's okay, I should note that Kusky has been able to return to the site to continue working. So some of you may have saw the update that just went out last week. So we're in regular contact with the neighbors, but our contractor is back on site and able to move again. So that's good news.
all right, very good. Thank you. All right, council, questions for Ms. Guerin? Comments?
Just a quick question. So the overrun is going to come out of the, essentially the sewer enterprise fund to take care of this?
That is correct. And I probably should note that we haven't identified any other contingency needs or cost overruns, so we might end up even lower than what I'm projecting today with savings on other line items, but we just won't know that yet till we get to road building.
And is that there seems to stand a chance that there could be some perhaps other unforeseen things that have happened beyond this, correct? So we might feel good that this could be the end of it, but there could be the ugly reality that we're not completely done here, correct?
Yeah, correct. So this change order includes everything that's been encountered to date, but certainly as the project continues, additional surprises could come along, but we're primarily done with the underground work. So usually that's where we start to see those risks go higher. The concern that I have in terms of just from a risk perspective is now that the contractor's back on site, we're going to revisit the project schedule and figure out what we can get built yet this year. And if we have to delay some work to next year, will there be a cost request associated with that? And that's where in prior communication to the council and to the city manager and working with our city attorney, we are evaluating if we can recover any of those costs that might come our way as a result of the utility company's delay to offset the impacts to the city.
Okay, and then when we go to calculate the portion that's assessed to properties that benefit this project along the way, will this piece be sort of segregated out so that this overrun is not necessarily distributed back to the property owners, or is this going to be equally divisible according to our normal formulas?
Sure. So in accordance with our policy, improvements or maintenance to the sanitary sewer system and water system are not assessed to property owners. So those wouldn't, they'd be removed for any calculations for assessments because you use the money you all pay in your monthly utility bills to cover the costs for fixing it.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to ensure that we approach it with fairness so that unforeseen things aren't unnecessarily distributed. Thanks for that explanation.
Yeah.
Good question. Council, other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, let's take 5.10 first then. And council will consider a motion.
Motion to approve change order number 1 and pay request number 6 for the Steiger Lake Lane West Phase 1 improvements.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to 5.2, which is the claims roster. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve September 25th, 2023 claims roster.
Thank you. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to 5.9, Ms. Hardy, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We're pulling this item again for transparency reasons. This item is related to the development agreement for the Roars project known as Rowan Lands. So typically there's some minor refining that happens with development agreements between the city's council and then the developer council, and that is happening with this project. So what I would say is we just wanted to note that this agreement is a little bit more complex than what we would typically see. There's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things happening, including the reconstruction of Rose Street with parking expansion, just some staging and construction, space and access, site restrictions and conditions that we're continuing to work through. So we want to make sure we get the language kind of buttoned up the way that works for everyone involved. And then the use of shared parking just makes this one a little bit more complicated. So there's been a lot more back and forth than what we would generally see. That being said, I would say that there are, as we noted in the staff reports, a few changes that have occurred since the packet went out. And we just wanted to highlight what those would be and summarize what those changes are to date. I think it's important to say that there's nothing substantially that has changed in the agreements, but enough movement that we wanted to just draw attention to that in a public way. So the biggest change is that that the agreement is now between the city and Roars and a new investor who's at the table. That investor is going to have a partial ownership interest in the project itself and is helping to finance that project. So that I think is probably safe to say the biggest change to the agreement than what was in the draft in the packet. The other couple of things that I just wanted to summarize and draw attention to are related to more housekeeping items. So landscape and tree mitigation, there was just a few things related to escrow and letter of credits that we wanted to clarify, so we added some language in there. And then in the letter of credit section, we also added additional language that we would, sorry, I'm just going to read it here. If the developer elects to use their letter of credit in lieu of a cash deposit for landscaping, then that letter of credit would be released when it's appropriate. And then we also added some developer default language by adding the 60-day timeline, which would benefit the city. So if they failed to provide public improvements, landscaping, or erosion control, the city would be able to take some action on that. So just a few minor housekeeping items, and I know that our attorney's been pretty engaged in the review of that. So if I've missed anything or misstated anything, I'll just send that to you to comment on.
Great.
All right, Attorney Vos, anything from you?
Mayor and Council, I made a list prior to the meeting, just knowing that you might want to hear about the high points of changes. Dana, the city manager's list was perfect. And so maybe I can just augment a couple of the points for your comfort. The biggest change, well, the biggest change is that the plat's called Rowan's Lands. I'm not sure that that was something that we talked a lot about in prior reviews. Of course, that's not substantively important, but it's interesting to know the name of the plat will be Rowan's Lands. The biggest change is the ownership issue, and just to nuance that a little bit. So as the city manager indicated, there will be a co-owner. This co-owner will only own an 11.6% interest in the land, so ownership of the land will be divided, but the division will be almost totally in favor of the developer that's always been in front of you, Rohr's Development Company. So it's a relatively small investor. They're investing in what's called a 1031 exchange. That's a pretty typical tax strategy that folks that operate in this sphere use. So the reason they're participating and joining in ownership is understandable. I guess the clarification about all that, the reason I want to give you comfort about all that is that while that entity will now have to consent to the development agreement, they'll have to join in the development agreement so that the agreement can be recorded against the property. We always, of course, want our development agreements to be recorded with real estate records so that we have more enforcement tools should we have to use them. They're going to join in the agreement so it can be recorded, but the developer remains. The party that's obligated to do this development, to do the construction, to make everything happen, remains solely Rohr's. So we won't be dealing with another party. We won't be seeking, correction of anything that happens along the way. We'll be dealing still with the same folks that have been in front of you. So that's one point to clarify. And then the other is with respect to parking. I think parking has probably been relatively high on the community and in particular your interest list. And that was a topic of a fair amount of discussion with developer reps here as we finalize the document. I would say, and of course I'm having to sort of summarize or characterize the issues that were raised, but I would say that the clarifications that we landed upon in relation to parking are all, I think, beneficial. You would say beneficial to your community. As an example, there was a discussion about imposing time limits on public parking. There will be 37 public spaces created in this development off Rose Street. So internal to the site, 37 parking spaces created. There was discussion about whether the city could, in accordance with its general policies regarding parking, could the city impose time limits on the parking within the site? And ultimately that's been clarified that yes, the city could do that in conjunction with imposing time limits on other public parking spaces around the city. Another example is that staff wanted very much to make clear that you could provide directional signage to these parking places. So signage that may not be on the site, might be in other parts of your downtown. And that was agreed to and clarified. And then within the site, you may actually want to have directional signage leading to the parking spaces. And with the very small caveat that our signage would be consistent with sort of the branding, the color scheme, if you will, of the private signage that will be on site. With that caveat, we've clarified that you can have public parking directional signage on-site as well as off-site. So sort of all positives regarding the public parking that this is going to create, but legitimate issues that developer raised that needed to be clarified.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Hardy, from you?
Nothing from staff.
All right, council, comments, questions? Thank you for your good hard work on that very detailed, very extensive development agreement. So with that, council, can I get a motion to adopt 5.9?
Motion to approve the development agreement between Roars Companies and the City of Victoria.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second?
Let's give that second to Councilmember Evansky. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now moving on to our regular agenda. The first item this evening is item 6.1, which is the presentation of the Shoreland Flexibility Ordinance. Presenting this evening is our city planner, Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. One moment here. All right, so yes, tonight we have a proposed ordinance from staff in front of you for shoreland flexibility. What is shoreland flexibility? It is a tool that the DNR uses to allow cities to have some flexibility given certain criteria. So I've taken this directly from their website. The intent is to address specific circumstances where compliance with specific provisions causes problems. Examples include central business districts that are located in shoreland. So our current shoreland ordinance, residential shoreland planned unit development, specifically section 22-10 of the zoning code, they are required for all multifamily projects. So anything over 4 units in a single building. Some examples would be Victoria Flats or the Roars project that we just recently discussed. So when projects like those are proposed in our central business district, we require a tier analysis to determine the allowed maximum density within 5 tiers from shoreland. And then some other provisions of our shoreland ordinance include a maximum 80% impervious surfacing in the CBD and a minimum 50% open space requirement. So on the left here, you can see the properties in the dark red. Those are our central business district parcels. And then on the right, you can see the 1,000-foot buffer, which encompasses our shoreland overlay district. You can see every single property that's within our CBD is also within our shoreland. So when considering multifamily projects within our central business district, which is our downtown mixed use district in the 2040 comprehensive plan, just wanted to note that that includes vertical mixed use projects consisting of 24 to 75 units per acre. So our higher density residential uses that also include a pedestrian friendly or commercial character that should be designed and designated to support a strong pedestrian environment. So those typically involve higher impervious surfaces. So just to note some recent projects, as I mentioned, the Roars project, they had a variance approved for the density increase. They had 125 units proposed with the tier analysis and our current RSPUD standards. They should have only been allowed 17.26. That's why they needed the variance. And then the variance was approved for open space. They had proposed less than 50%, but the allowable minimum was 50%. And then the Amira project, open space here didn't really factor into that because it was 56 acres for the total site. It's our largest site in our central business district. But they did get a variance approved for the density increase. So they had proposed 149 units. The tier analysis would have only allowed them 33.98. So the proposed ordinance we have for you tonight would exempt the central business district from the RSPUD requirements, specifically for density and open space. This would be allowed under 3 conditions. The development does not propose riparian access. It complies with the future land use designation of 24 to 75 units per acre in our downtown mixed use, and compliance with other sections of the shoreland overlay district. If approved tonight, variances would no longer be required for open space and density in the CBD. The DNR has reviewed and conditionally approved the request contingent upon City Council adoption of the ordinance tonight. At the Planning Commission meeting this past Tuesday, a public hearing was held. No members from the public attended or commented on the request, and they recommended adopting the ordinance and summary publication with a unanimous vote. So tonight I have two sample motions for you, one to adopt the ordinance and then the second to adopt the summary publication. With that, staff will stand for questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. McCann. Council, questions? All right, seeing none, we'll take this in two motions. So, council, can I get the first motion?
Motion to adopt the ordinance to amend section 22-10 of the zoning code?
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And I will entertain another motion.
Motion to adopt the resolution approving summary publication.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, there are no more items to come before the body this evening, so we'll move on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, you're up first. Anything from you this evening?
Mayor and council, I do not have anything I need to tell you about.
All right, very good. Ms. Hardy, anything from staff?
Nothing from staff this evening, Mayor.
And council, anything from council this evening?
Nothing for you, Mayor.
All right, seeing nothing, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thanks and good evening.